Hello and welcome to this workshop. My name is Wolfgang Schmidle. I work at the DAI, which is the German Archaeological Institute in our Berlin branch. I thank you all for being here, for being interested in what we present, and a great thanks also to our organizer team. Most of you will know that the SSHOC project, SSHOC stands for the Social Sciences and Humanities into the European Open Science Cloud. So basically, it's a push towards doing in the cloud. And our task is an archaeological case study. So very roughly speaking, we are also trying to put our stuff in the cloud. The actual content of our task has changed over the time. So when I wrote the first description of this task, it was the idea that we go to an archaeological community and say, what is your data? What are your systems? What are your pain points? And we write some software for you, and then you are somehow in the cloud. And when this group formed of the different partners, it became clear that it would be much more effective if we start out with our own systems and try to connect them. And this turned out to be difficult enough, actually. So one thing that we have learned is that be happy with small successes, and you cannot completely change the field of archaeology in one task. So the idea basically is to create a workflow that starts with archaeological, excavation data and survey data, and then prepare the data so that you end up with a 3D or 4D visualization of the data from an archaeological site. Right now, it's the archaeological part is restricted to the survey data. The excavation data is not in there yet. This is because for the case study that we have chosen, we simply don't have the data yet, but we will extend the workflow to excavation data in the time to come. And a new thing that we are working on now is linked open data. So the original title of the task also had linked open data in it. And we removed this a little bit, but then the reviewers said that they were quite happy with the implementation plan that we wrote, and that it's nicely written and very clear, but they would still like to see linked open data. So we went back to that. And the parts that I present today will be mainly about that. Keep in mind, this is all work in progress. And now, without further ado, I give the word to Alberto.
So good morning, everybody. I'm Alberto Bucciero. I'm a researcher at the Institute of Heritage Science of the Italian National Council of Researchers, and I'm currently the coordinator of the SSHOC project for the ISPC unit of Lecce, a little town in the far south of Italy. I'm also the coordinator of the European Research Infrastructure for Heritage Science, always for the ISPC node of Lecce unit. In my speech, I will present the ISPC team members, and I will give you a very short overview of our activities. Dealing with archaeology, art, and technology, the team must be very multidisciplinary. We have classic archaeologists like Ivan Ferrari and Emanuel Demetrescu. We will be the next presenter. Art historian like Alessandra Chiriri and Francesco Giuri, that, by the way, will present the starting point of the work, a very first virtual reconstruction of the archaeological site taken into consideration. And finally, we must have also the computer scientist like me and Bruno Fanini, who is also the author of the real-time 3D rendering framework that has been used to navigate the 3D reconstruction. The activities carried out by the WUL National Research Council relating to the task 5.7, Open Linked Data and Archaeology Key Study, were at the beginning divided between two different CNR institutes, IBAM based in Lecce and ITABC based in Rome. Although these two institutes dealt with very similar topics, such as archaeology and virtual reconstruction, they adopted substantially different working methods with distinct goals. The first had high skills in photorealistic and cinematographic virtual reconstruction. The second preferred the more rigorous aspect of the scientific method, linking the representation of the 3D scenarios to metadata and providing also a real-time navigation. In 2019, the new ISPC Institute was founded and incorporated the previous two, and today consists of 7 units on the Italian territory. As a result of this union, it seems natural to try to merge the two working methods within the SSHOC project. The archaeological site that was selected as key study for this project was that of the Roman Theatre of Catania for several reasons. First, the Roman theatre is certainly one of the best preserved examples of this type of Roman architecture. Second, this archaeological site presents evidence of different construction phases. And third, this place had already been subject of surveys and data acquisition campaigns in 2016 on the occasion of the Open City project, and therefore did not need further inspection made hard due to the restriction of the pandemic. The nature and the result of these surveys will be explained by my colleague Francesco Giuri in one of the next speeches. The activities carried out in special by the unit of ISPC based in Lecce were focused on the feasibility study of the key study for the SSHOC project aimed at setting up a system for the documentation, analysis and visualization of the archaeological site, the provision of datasets deriving from the acquisition activities carried out in situ, and in particular the 3D models taken by the laser scanning activities, digital photogrammetry images, photos, video shooting with unmanned aerial vehicles, and scientific literature. My unit also provided the first virtual reconstruction of the archaeological site, done in a previous project that gave us the chance to test a new documentation process of the virtual reconstruction workflow, applying it to a well-known and well-defined use case, the Roman Theatre of Catania. Just because the archaeological site of Catania Theatre had already been studied, the starting point of the use case in question was able to benefit from a very important result, an high-quality virtual reconstruction of the entire site. As you will see in the following video, it was a very high graphic result. The problem of such a virtual reconstruction is that they are not connected to the data that led to this reconstructive hypothesis. In the next speech, Emanuel will show you how we were able to overcome this limit using an approach called extended metrics. And now the short 3-minute video. That's it. Thank you for your attention, and I will leave the stage to my colleague, Emanuel. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. So I'm Emanuel Demetrescu. I'm a researcher at the Institute of Heritage Science. I'm a colleague of Alberto and Francesco and Bruno. I have an experience of more than 15 years on the field of digital archaeology. I work mainly in the creation of methodological and technical links between the creators of the cultural heritage record, namely the archaeologists, the historians, restorers, architects, and so on and so forth, and the creative industries, the creation of applied games, virtual museums, and so on. I focus also in methods and tools to create digital replicas and virtual reconstructions, both to improve the scientific aspects and the aesthetics aspects related to virtual reconstruction. I want to start from another project because it's part of the DNA of our laboratory, the Virtual Museum of Ancient Clear Flaminia, that was reenacted inside another European project, the VMAST European project. Why? Here we are talking about the Catania theater, but in our experience, we had to work on the metadata of virtual museum of the ancient Via Flaminia, and we have the same opportunities and problems. The virtual museum of the ancient Via Flaminia was a virtual reality application based on multi-user devices installed at the National Roman Museum in Rome. It was used by thousands of tourists and users, and it was not only a pioneeristic project, but it was also a game changer in the domain of digital archaeology and virtual archaeology, because it was something very new with a very high scientific profile. Unfortunately, this virtual museum was closed in June 2011 due to problems in the maintaining of the installation. And we will see what were the problems. And inside the VMAST European project, we tried to reenact this virtual museum using the original assets. And so we made the Flaminia Reloaded project, porting to Unity 3D these assets, this virtual museum, with a focus of natural interaction and storytelling. And another side project behind Lias Villa, with a focus on make them accessible, the online metadata about the reconstruction processes. Something very difficult to do, actually. We try to use an open framework, the X-Freedom framework from the Fraunhofer Institute. The issues in reusability of these assets were mainly in the obsolescence of the technologies, because these assets were made using the assets themselves were open, because they were OBJs and so regular open formats in the computer graphic domain. But the authoring tool, VirTools, was a closed software. And more than that, a software that was discontinued. So we were not able to update the software license. So because of its closed nature from a software point of view, it was impossible to reenact it as it was made previously by the team of Maurizio Forte in at the middle of years 2000. The other issue was on the content side, because the metadata about the reconstructions were available only as a traditional scientific publication, a very high profile publication with a very in-depth description of the processes of the elements reconstructed and so on and so forth. But unfortunately, several reconstructive processes remained in the mind of the archaeologists. I mean, some aspects in the 3D model were not directly described in the text of the publication, and a minor part, okay. But some doubts appeared during the formal description of the model. So this project that changed the rules of the games in this domain stimulated also a new way, a new research direction. In the case we have an already reconstructed site like the Villa di Livia and the Roman Theater of Catania, we need a tool, something, a formal way to describe the processes used to make the reconstruction. So in Catania, we have exactly the same issue. The metadata are available only as a scientific publication. Having an existing reconstruction, we need a posthumous protocol to make a sort of reverse engineering, starting from the reconstruction to the metadata that lead to the reconstruction itself. And we have the need to provide open data and open formats for the reconstruction. At the beginning of the SSHOC test case project, we had all the assets inside the cinema for the software, and we translate all these elements inside an open framework like Blender 3D. And we need also a dissemination tool to make it available all data, and we use the EMviq extended matrix visual inspection query. That is a web app based on Atom that will be described by my colleague Bruno in one of the speeches to come. And with the occasion of this project, we worked to connect different platforms. So tools to semantically annotate reconstructions and 3D models using the extended matrix framework. The Atom 3 framework to visualize online 3D models and enriched 3D models. And the IDI tools that will be described by Wolfgang Schmidle. Just a glimpse on the extended matrix posthumous protocol edition. So it's a way to say that is a particular way to use the extended matrix. Normally, the extended matrix is used at the very beginning of a reconstructive project. I'm studying a site. I'm trying to document a monument or an object or a collection and so on and so forth. I use the extended matrix aside with the tools that I normally use to survey, to describe, and to annotate the artifacts that I study. And so extended matrix helps me to have a better understanding of what I'm studying. Okay. And at the end of the project, I have all the stuff ready for the dissemination, also for regarding the reconstruction side. In this case of Villa di Livia, and in this specific case of the Theater of Catania, the Roman Theater of Catania, we already had the reconstruction. So the idea is to start from the reconstruction, annotating all the elements and trying to remember what was the sources used and how they were used. What is exactly the line, the chain, the data chain that led to the reconstruction hypothesis. For that reason, we divided all the reconstruction in several elements. It is a work in progress. You can see here a glimpse, an example, with the pieces of the reconstruction annotated with a number and a form with all the properties that were object of hypothesis, like the material it was used in the reconstruction, the total length of a column, for instance, the weight, and so on and so forth, and the sources used and how they were used in order to validate such a property. We will see in depth in the first part of the webinar how we use the extended matrix on the data. In the next speech, Francesco Giuri, my colleague, will tell us in depth how they built the original record, the survey, and how they performed the virtual reconstruction hypothesis. So I give the floor to Francesco.
Hi, Emanuel. Thank you. Well, I am Francesco Giuri. I am graduated in Cultural Heritage in 2003 at the University of Salento, but since 2006, I have been collaborating with the Information Technology Laboratory of the Institute of Heritage Science of the National Research Council based in Italy, based in Lecce. I took part in several national and international projects concerning the study, survey, and development of reconstructive hypotheses of monuments and archaeological sites aimed at technology enhancement and diffusion of cultural heritage. I am specialized in 3D modeling, photorealistic rendering, and survey. Today, I will show you, Today, I will show you some results that was achieved in the Open City project in 2016. I was just anticipated by Alberto. The main focus of this project was the virtual reconstruction of a Roman theater in Catania. The authors were Francesco Giuri, Ivan Ferrari, and me. But we were part of a multidisciplinary research group that counts different professionals. About the Roman theater of Catania, we can say that it stands in the heart of the historic center, but the original structure seems to date to the Greek period. But the building visible today was built during the Julio-Claudian period as a part of a program that saw the rebuilding of the monument and the city. Between the Antonine and the Severan periods, the structure was extended and underwent transformation that give entire complex monumental aspect. Between the 5th and the 16th century Anno Domini, the theater lost its original function, and from this moment, the building slowly deteriorated. The process of developing a virtual heritage project involving digital reconstruction of enhanced architecture imply a challenge and complex workflow. The process is based on bottom-up and top-down strategies. Bottom-up is related to the still existing material and measurable evidence. Top-down refers to the information that coming from interpretative studies based on literary, iconographic sources, proportional review, and comparison. The workflow is organized in 4 main steps. They are documentation, survey, data processing or interpretation, and 3D reconstruction hypothesis. The first type of data to support the philological reconstruction concerns the bibliography, the written and iconographic source related to the object investigated, and when possible, also the data already organized and structured. The second step is the survey. It's important for the formal knowledge and the study of the object itself. The problem faced by interpretative and reconstructive study essentially lies in the absence of accurate and updated graphic documentation. To remedy this lacuna, it was decided to undertake a survey campaign using a laser scanner and the digital photogrammetry. Laser scanner is a high-definition survey instrument able in measuring million points of a 3D object with a great precision, accuracy, and high rapidity. Instead, the digital photogrammetry provides extremely dense and precise 3D surface with, thanks to a good number of photos captured with standard digital photography equipment in a short time. Laser scanner, about laser scanner, we can say that the survey, the work in situ was set up with the aim of covering all the surfaces. Its big size required the planning of a series of stations that would cover the entire external perimeter and the cavea and each individual walkway. The laser scanner survey was performed using a Leica P20 instrument. The coverage of all wall surface required 39 different station points, each set at a resolution of 6 mm on a dome of 10 meters. The measurement resolution chosen made it possible to have an easily manageable amount of data. The acquired data were first processed in Leica Cyclone software to align the point cloud and to export them in a single file of 100 gigabytes with a trillion of points. After this, the points were decimaled using Geometric Studio software to get a polygonal mesh with a good level of detail. But due to the excessive number of points, it was necessary to divide the point cloud into 4 parts for mesh reconstruction. And finally, we got a good model of 10 million polygons that was exported in OBJ file of about 900 megabytes. In this way, it was possible to generate a three-dimensional model that, for practical reasons, had to undergo a polygon decimation, which, however, facilitated the extrapolation of a series of sections. These represent the starting point for its three-dimensional reconstruction. The first and important phase was the study and the definition of the cavias loop and the exact positioning of the heights of the floor levels, relating to the walkways and intermediate passageways. No less important was the understanding of the levels at which the spectator access points were positioned. The laser scanner revealed the presence of a semicircular cavea with a maximum width of 97 meters and depth of 51 meters and an overall height that from the orchestra must reach 26 meters. The survey with the laser scanner has been useful to rectify the weakness of the graphic documentation available today. As I have already anticipated, another important step was the digital reproduction of some representative decorative architectural elements using digital photogrammetry. For the photographic survey was using a Canon 5D with a resolution of 24 million of pixels, and the Agisoft photo scanner was the software used for digitalization. The digital copy realized after was inserted in the virtual reconstruction. Once the metric characteristics were acquired and the data cross-checked with the published material, it was opportune to link the hypothetical reconstruction to one of the monument's most interesting phases. It began in the Antonine period and probably continued until the Severian period. During this phase, the theater underwent radical restoration involving the enlargement of the structure with the building of a tiered walkway, the creation of a new front scena, and new external facade. About the virtual reconstruction, the study provided an unpublished hypothetical reconstruction of the Roman theater, aimed at the dissemination of cultural content, also immediately unstable by non-experts. This contribution is taken as a starting point for the new study and investigation that can be better redefine the different stages of the monument. We used the Maximum Cinema 4D software for modeling, texturing, and animation, while Blu-ray was the render engine used for frame animation. The final model had 20 million polygons and 138 megabytes of texture. In this slide, we can see the virtual reconstruction over the laser scanner survey. In the next slide, I will show you some render. This is an aerial view, render over the aerial view, and with the cross section indicate that we can see in this slide. These are a vertical section of the theater in scale. This is a planar section at different level. This is a view of the cavea and orchestra. The orchestra has been proposed with its original flooring of bichrome marble slabs, shaped to create geometric motifs with inscribed circle inside the square. This is a view of Scena front. This is other details. And at the end, we can say that the study also included the recontextualization of the Roman theater within the urban fabric, also characterized by the presence of the Odeon, another Roman building of considerable importance, whose remains are still visible in the west area of the theater. Thank you for your attention to all. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I now continue with the presentation of how we use the extended matrix on top of the model just described by Francesco. The second lesson that VMAST project gave us was the importance to ingest the metadata during the project. We made a survey among the partners of the VMAST project. The VMAST project was a European project focused on the virtual museums creation. So the very goal of this project was to make a connection between who creates the cultural record and the stakeholders in the use of using the cultural heritage in the digital domain. And the partners made a lot of virtual reconstructions of the sites. And at the question, when do you ingest the metadata for your reconstruction? They said all of them at the end of the project with an extra effort. In some cases, the extra effort means extra budget. But let's say that we have the budget. Sometimes it's an extra time budget that maybe we can't afford. A possible solution is to use the metadata as a scientific tool to be used during the production. It is not only a matter of budget. In some cases, you can even forget the process of reconstruction if you don't annotate it during the process itself. In our domain, in archaeology, we have to deal a lot with fragments, broken remains of ancient objects or architecture. So we have a lot of definition of fragment of. So we can state in some cases that it is almost impossible to interpret an object without thinking to the original impact shape of the object itself. In this case, a Corinthian capital. It is interesting to focus on the fact that to reconstruct somehow is to understand, is to compare what we have to what we maybe it was in the past. So it's a way also to understand, to make hypotheses on the function of an object, of a place, and so on and so forth. Using the metadata as a research tool improves also the way we share the information. We can use it as a research tool to make academic dissemination, papers, books, and so on and so forth, or to validate the content for the creative industries. And this is a very important aspect also from a professional point of view. So our approach is the extended matrix. What is the extended matrix? It's a formal language for the creation of virtual reconstructions for cultural heritage. The atomic element of the extended matrix is the virtual stratigraphic unit. And the extended matrix formally is an oriented graph, not hierarchic, where we can annotate, we can draw our metadata like nodes and arches using a very well-known metaphor in the archaeological domain, that is the matrix of Harris. It is a schemaless approach because if we are confident with an information, we annotate it. If we are not confident with it, we avoid to put it in the canvas. I mean, if regarding a column, we can state something regarding the material, a marble column and so on, we can just connect a property node with marble to the reconstructed object. And in other cases, we are not dealing with materials. We are working on other aspects of the reconstructed elements. So it depends of what we are trying to annotate. Is a WYSIWYG approach. What you see is what you get. The database is the ingestion form of itself. You just drag and drop the elements in the canvas and connect them. And it's based on a GraphDB database approach using ISO standard that is the GraphML. At the moment, we use this formula, but in the future, we think that we will shift to another platform, a GraphDB, because GraphDB are great, but they are a liquid entity. So the interconnection of elements, it's not so easy to be memorized and analyzed by the human brain. You know, we are all confident that Germany is the geographical middle of Europe, and Italy is in the southern part, and we know all the elements where are. So we know elements also using their position space. So for that reason, it is important to have a human readable spatial rule. We use the Y as a time. So the upper, the earlier, the lower, the older. And in the X dimension, we use the data load. Or in the next version of the extended matrix, we will use different hypotheses. So if we have alternative hypotheses in our reconstruction. Each reconstructive element has its data chain validation with a paradata. We said something about the material, like a property we can just connect. And we have sources that we interpret, and in some cases we use also reasonings, and we connect all this stuff together, attached to the reconstructed element. It's a very easy, simple chain. We have the source, we have an extractor that interprets the source. What you have to say, what you have to see in the source, what I have seen, what I interpreted in the source itself, and the property I'm able to deploy and to attach to the reconstructed element. Everything starts from the gap in the material culture. We have a broken element, we need to reconstruct it, and putting in temporal relations presences and absences, and it is the sake of the extended matrix. We have something that we already have, a wall, a broken wall, and we can all even understand when it was broken, and we can restore the missing part. So all the epochs documented in a regular matrix are filled with a specific horizon for a specific epoch that we want to reconstruct. We have the data that are objective data, sources, even so they can be images, reports, and studies, and so on and so forth. We have interpretation nodes where we put our ideas on and we modify the sources from our perspective. It's an interpretation. We have combiner nodes for the reasoning, combining different interpretations, and finally we have the property node. From a graphical point of view, we have the digital replica. The proxy models, here the proxies are very simple geometries, polygons, or even simple layers, 3D layers that we use with different colors to map the different reconstructive nodes in the extended matrix. And we have finally the representation models. There are 3 levels, and we can overlap them in our presentation. In the case of the Catania Theater, we had a lot of good quality data created by our colleagues in Lecce. External sources, point clouds, a very correct approach to the metric aspects of the survey of the documentation of the site. But we need to annotate also the reconstructive processes. So we use this posthumous protocol edition, so taking the reconstruction and annotating backward as a reverse engineering project to understand how they choose some sources and how they use them. A lot of sources, because it's a very important archaeological site with a lot of studies in the last years. Everything was put together inside a folder tree, very easy approach, with the extended matrix folder with the GraphML inside, with database of the reconstructive hypothesis. The raw data with all the stuff collected during the years by the colleagues. The reality-based model, the digital replica, basically, with the laser scanner of the theater. And the representation model the colleagues provided us. And the proxy model with the semantic layer. Each element in scene is a reconstructive element inside the extended matrix. And we made, from the raw data, we made a sort of dossier comparative, a folder with all the documents, document 1, document 2, 3, and so on and so forth, the sources used. And inside the extended matrix, we connected them accordingly in order to validate the properties of the reconstructive elements. So we use 2 tools in the present version of the extended matrix. We are now in the version 1.2 of the extended matrix. We have 2 tools, Blender as a visualization and editing the software for 3D scenes, and YED, that is a graph editor that is able to make very clear layouts. And here we need to have a tool where we can draw our metadata. So we put in the correct moment in time all the elements, and we can retrieve them where we expect to find them in the correct time space. So actually we can use 2 computers, 2 monitors, or even the same monitor, but it's not so comfortable. Or like in our case, we can use 2 different users that are working on different computers with different softwares together, using a cloud solution, in our case QSync, but you can use Dropbox or whatever you want, because the extended matrix is a very small file, and we can share very quickly between on the network. And so we are able to add some elements in the extended matrix and have an immediate feedback inside the 3D environment. In Blender, we developed a custom solution, Python-based add-on that is extended matrix tools, not a very simple name, where you are able to load the extended matrix database, the GraphML, and to list all the reconstructive elements, all the periods in this case, the present times and the Adrianea, the Severian epoch and the Adrianea epochs in our reconstruction, and to connect all the elements we are modeling inside the scene with the database. And we can make a lot of other things like rendering the scenes with all the labels of the reconstructed elements, turning on and off the epochs, and it's a very convenient way to work with semantic data inside the Blender. I want to show you an example of creation of a proxy that is a way to highlight a part of the model. Here we have the photogrammetric model, and we are just adding the podium of the scene, adding in the meanwhile, at the same time, or one after the other one, the elements inside the extended matrix, adding the description of the element, and back we can connect in this case the stratigraphic unit 1 with the corresponding proxy inside the Blender. Starting from now, we are able to turn it on, turn it off, change the colors, see the different epochs, and so on and so forth. It is an iterative process. We start from our stratigraphic reading of the site. We can perform the stratigraphic reading of the site directly on top of the digital replica. In the case we have a very high resolution digital replica, and we are able in the meanwhile to add the semantic elements inside the extended matrix. So it's an iterative process. Is a modular process because we can just assign a task to an archaeologist or an architect or a restorer that is able to read the masonry, the elements according to a stratigraphic point of view, the superimposition of elements in time, reading the events that hit the site, destroying a wall, closing a window, and so on and so forth. And putting all these elements in a relative chronological relation inside the extended matrix, we can assign the modeling aspects of the proxies to a junior 3D modeler that can be also an archaeologist or an architect, or it can be just a modeler that is instructed to work on the task of enrich the 3D space. Sure, we will have also a third part that is the representation model creation. That is a very is the model where you have also the textures, the colors, the light, and everything is beauty because it's a communicative model that is when it is based on scientific evidences, for sure is a scientific tool, but it's more focused on the aesthetic side. The proxy model is the somehow is the structure on top of what you can create, the final representation model. And what is best in the end is that you can make the metadata during the production. So iterative process, and during the project you are doing the metadata. And at the end of the project, you will have all the stuff ready for your publication. Here in the extended matrix tool, we have also an export manager in the lower part where you can click on EMviq exporter, providing a folder, a cloud folder, to export all the stuff here in the Atom framework, in the EMviq framework that will be described by Bruno in the next session, in the late morning. We have also a Paradata manager here. We don't have time to focus on it because this project, this Catania project, is a work in progress still. I hope we will have the chance in a few months to disseminate also the final project. In the Paradata manager, we have also inside Blender all the sources used and how they are used in order to provide the correct properties to the objects. Final 3D modeler is able here to read, please do this column in Marble. And here they are the examples you can use. Okay, thank you so much. Here is just the work in progress of the annotation of the reconstructive part, in the lower part. So I give the floor to, I guess it's time to work to, yes, for Wolfgang.
Yes. So I have only one slide, and I would actually like to do more of a small live presentation. So I would like to share my screen. Okay. So, as I said, I work at the German Archaeological Institute. It was founded in 1829, not in Germany, but in Rome, actually. And it was originally called, forgive me for my Italian pronunciation, Istituto di Corrispondenza Archeologica. So it was somehow meant as a network of scholars that are interested in antiquity, which was a new thing at this time. So it's close to the invention of modern archaeology. Later, around 1870, the Prussian state decided to finance it and take it under its wings. So for that reason, we are still part of the German Foreign Ministry. And it grew over time. So what you see here is all the departments in the world. And if we scroll in and leave out the Asian parts, then you have some parts in Germany. Rome is still the biggest department. You have Madrid and Lisbon and Athens and the Middle East and so on. And what I want to show you now is our system of services, web services called IDI World. So we have a lot of services. The most important one is called IDI Objects here. I guess many people call it Arachne, or it's known under the name Arachne as well. And that's an archaeological database. And we have IDI Field, which is a system for documenting excavations. And we have the Gazetteer for place names and chronology for temporal terms and other services. IDI Bibliography is our library catalog, basically. So, and what I want to show you is Arachne. Oops. Okay. So we will come to Arachne in a second. Yeah, actually. So in Arachne, or in the IDI world, you have the Roman theater in two ways. The first is as a place in the gazetteer of place names. And so it's in Catania, and it's in Sicily, and in Italy, and in Europe. And then you have the theater also as an object, as a building. And there you have the connection to what we saw, to the place, Catania. And what is very important here, so you have information about the building, you have a description. Unfortunately, it's mainly in German, even though I switched to English, because the information is just entered in German most of the time. So it's a theater. It has a time according to Mr. Wilson. It has a cultural epoch and a Roman province and so on. And then you have linked objects. So this object, this theater came into the catalog because it is connected to some objects that are in this theater. And these objects came into the catalog because there were projects where all images from some books were digitized, some out of copyright books. And the place and object information was added then, so that you get a network of archaeological information. And here, this is the plinth that Emanuel was also talking about. And so you can go back to the place, the building. You can look at the book page where it's on. Here you can see it even in more detail. And so on. And so we already saw that you have the place information, and you can also have some time information. So Kaiserzeitlich means the emperor time in the Roman Empire, Roman Imperial. And okay, that's the point of a live presentation. It didn't say no map data available half an hour ago, but this is how it is. But the point is that we can describe here time periods, and as with all norm data, one wants to describe them in a separate place, because you have some information about this period that you don't want to put in all your databases. And it's easier to administer this data, of maintaining this data in a separate place. I will talk about the gazetteer and chronology later. And for now, I only want to show you some very short glimpse of our system IDIVE field for documentation of excavations. Actually, you can also document surveys here. And in the background, you have a database and you have an app. So it also works in the field when you have no online connection, because it can then synchronize the data. So you start with some metadata. Here you already have the possibility to enter a stratigraphic unit from the Harris matrix. You can create shapes. You can put these things that you have created in a hierarchy, which is then becomes the Harris matrix. Yeah, so if you're in the field and you need to synchronize later, you can do this here. Another view, so you can see it as a table or with a map. And this nesting is that you can create your stratigraphic units and then put them together in any way you like, which then creates your Harris matrix. So for the time being, this is all about the IDI world. And then I give the word to who, actually?
So now it's supposed to have a small focus on the integration of the systems and data.
Okay.
Okay. So the process that leads us from the study of an archaeological site to the determination of the reconstructive hypothesis and its representation in 3D is complex and made up of many steps that involve different professionals and involve also the use of many different tools. A simplification of this process, already presented by Emanuel and by Francesco, is depicted in the graph. As already Emanuel and Francesco said, that the process starts from the remote study phase, that is mainly biographical, and produce reference to papers, to picture, and so on. And after that, data are acquired in the on-field survey and are post-processed to get the 3D object that finally will be able to constitute the 3D virtual reconstruction of the archaeological site. What I wanted to highlight in this slide is that every single step generates data in input that represent the in output, sorry, that represents the input of the next step. It happens a very usual thing that even if the result of the research can be excellent, raw data that have been acquired, interpreted, and processed are completely lost in a personal archiving system, and as they are not shared nor provided of metadata, as already Emanuel said. So the problem is that the focus of the activities is toward the publication of the result, wasting and losing all the data set that were the intermediate step to get to the final result. The SSHOC project gave us the opportunity to rethink the whole process, going from data acquisition to virtual reconstruction. So we also had the opportunity to write the first draft of data management plan of this project, understood that we need to deploy all the intermediate data on a centralized open access repository. This to avoid that data and knowledge were lost. And also in order to apply fairness principle to the reconstruction workflow. In this way, we will able to ensure the findability of our data sets, decorating data with proper metadata and the unique identifiers, the accessibility, ensuring long-lasting to the digital resources, the interoperability, for example, allowing link to external data sources such as IDI field and chronontology, and the reuse, that is the most important result, allowing the sharing of the raw data at least in a first stage within the research team, and then opening them also to the research community. This is so our plan for the immediate future. So to implement and this open access repository and to deploy our record set to this repository. These are my little contribute. I leave the speech to Emanuel, I think.
So integration of data, the absolutely new thing for us was the integration with the IDI tools. The extended matrix itself, it's more an aggregating tool, because you don't have to mind too much to what are the tools you use in your production, what are the sources involved, 3D models or text, images, or whatever, and where you store them. What is important actually is to have the possibility to point to that source. If you are using the IDI field tool, you have a tool that is able to provide a unique identifier. It's an online service. It is on all the time. It's a 24-hour service, and it is a perfect way to share the data, and it's a perfect repository to connect to. The extended matrix can be used also with other elements connected to inside. How does it work? The nodes in the graph ML have a description inside, a naming, and an URL pointing to an external source. For that reason, the extended matrix itself is a tiny database, because it's more focused on the relation between data. It is not a comprehensive database with all the data inside. It's an arbor, a sort of pivot to go to the different sources and to point to the correct source when you need it. So we made a first experiment to connect the reconstruction of the Catania theater, according to the extended matrix formal language, to the IDI field. We found some elements inside the IDI object Arachne tool, like this basis of is a decorated print of a column in the first order of the scene of the Catania theater, and we were able to use as a source not a local image or a page of a book from the studies provided for this decorative apparatus. It's the Professor Pensabene that made the most comprehensive scientific study on this topic. But we were able to link to external source, like this drawing inside the IDI database. It worked very well. It is a very simple connection with no more than that. But for us, it opens a completely new approach to the reconstruction of this site. Trying to connect the sources where they are accessible. In this case, in the IDI field. I prefer to give the floor to Wolfgang to close with some glimpses on the linked open data and the opportunity to connect, to use the extended matrix focused just in linked open data.
So since we are nearly out of time in the first part, I will make it very quick. If I have more time in the second part, I will talk about linked open data in more detail. At this point, I just want to say, so what you saw, these connections in Arachne, from buildings to places and books and book pages and the library catalog and the norm data, so is in a way, one could call it proto-linked open data. It doesn't fulfill all the criteria, of course, but it is somehow in this direction and we can harvest that. We have our gazetteer that I showed you with Catania. And so this is actually proper linked open data with different versions if you are a human or a machine. What I would like to show you very shortly, no, I show this afterwards if we have time. So this linked open data is very new to us, and in a way, at least in this setting, linked open data is around in geodata for me for a longer time. And the point is always that linked open data, should I actually define what this is? No, not now. I can do this later. The point is that it works well in very standardized settings. So for example, for Wikimedia, which is the data backbone of Wikipedia, it works well because they have a very clear data model and so on. And it works in settings like Nomisma, which is about coins, where you have a clear idea of the coin and its two sides and the information that you want to gather about it. But already in geodata, it becomes a little fuzzy and wobbly. And with our 3D visualization and the Harris matrix, it becomes even fuzzier and wobblier. So there are many interesting questions that are open and that I am, for example, discussing in a group in the Pelagios project, which is about geodata and annotations of historical texts. And these are difficult questions, and we try to come up with reasonable answers in our task for our specific setting. And the text that you see on this slide actually is a part of it, and that is that you can only put linked open data. There's the link in linked open data. And you can only put data together if they are talking about the same thing. So for example, here you have epoch and phase and activity and action, and it becomes smaller and smaller and smaller. And for example, our time gazetteer doesn't use these terms. So one thing that we need to do is to actually align these terms. And I'm very much looking forward to it. And I think now it's time for the break. So I only have the job to introduce the speakers and the topics. So we have 3 parallel sessions. One is about CDOC-CIM, and a reference ontology that was created in the SSHOC project, and Athina Kitsotaki will present it. She works at the 4th in Heraklion on Crete in Greece, and she is has a lot of experience with CDOC CRM. And the 2nd is about the FAIR principles, which everyone has heard about and no one knows the details. Holly will present them. Holly Wright from the Archaeological Data Service in York in the UK. And the 3rd is the EMviq system, which is somehow part of the extended matrix universe, and Bruno will present it. And very shortly, so there are 3 parallel sessions. I have forgotten actually if we are allowed to choose which topic we are listening to. So Athina, of course, will be a little more theoretic, and Bruno's will be a little more technical, but they will be all interesting. And I would love to see them all, but I can't because for some reason I am note taker in one of these sessions.
Thank you all for being here. I'm Bruno, of course. I'm a fellow researcher at CNR ISPC, a colleague of Emanuel, Alberto, and others. I'm a computer scientist, PhD. My main focus is on research and development of in the field of real-time 3D. So all the applications and services that deal with interactive applications, including Web 3D applications and also immersive VR applications applied to the cultural heritage field, of course. Today, I'm going to introduce to you the EMviq tool. That is a tool specifically designed for the extended matrix formalism. And first of all, I'll give you a bit of background in terms of the origins of this tool. So at the beginning, this was like 5 years ago, we started working on several prototypes. The main goal was to create a tool for professionals working with the extended matrix formalism. So the main idea was to create some kind of interactive tool that professionals could use to inspect and query such complex data. Okay. At the beginning, was a desktop tool, was based on an open source framework called OpenSceneGraph. It was C++, and but already 5 years ago, it provided a very nice playground for research in terms of research, because we were basically investigating several topics, very interesting topics, including how we can extract all the data that is inside an extended matrix into the form of runtime structure that can be used inside an interactive tool. Of course, there is the very the topic of how we can query and inspect this complex environment. This is a 4-dimensional environment in this case, and then also of course presentation. How can present this information to the user. Also in terms of when using more advanced devices like immersive VR devices, like in this case, as you saw in the video, there were some kind of experimental presentation, 3D user interfaces to present all the connection between several elements of the extended matrix into a 3D space. Okay, so it was very important to have this kind of prototyping years in order to develop this kind of research playground where we could experiment and test several approaches. These are other few screenshots from the early prototypes, including also the some experimental peeling operators that allows you to carve time and space inside this four-dimensional environment. These are all prototypes that we tested in this kind of desktop applications. So after the all the prototypes inside within the SSHOC project, the main goal was to bring all this as an experience of this desktop tool and prototypes in order to create an online web-based tool, a completely web-based tool. That means that you just open a web page and you have all these kind of functionalities inside the sort of interactive component. Okay, so the main goal was to also to create the tool to be able to be cross device. So that means that you could use this interactive tool on several devices. And of course, since we are on the web, we completely remove the requirement of the installation. So the idea was to and is to provide a tool that does not require an installation for the users. Okay, so here you can see there is the official web page of the new EMviq tool. This new version of the tool is actually based on another open source framework developed by us that is called Atom. Here you can see there is also the web page. This is a very large framework that we choose to use to develop on top. The EMviq tool was developed on top of this framework for several reasons. Here I list just a few. One is, of course, the fact that this Atom framework embraces all the modern web standards and open specifications, both in terms of formats for 3D models. That is very crucial also for interoperability with other frameworks and other libraries, and also for web standards for the presentation side. So it is they are all embraced by the framework. It provides a cross-device presentation. That means once again that once you create this web-based tool, you can consume it on mobile devices up to computers and up to head-mounted displays and immersive VR. And especially important here is the efficiency of query that are offered by the framework, because we are dealing with a lot of queries of, in this case, is a more complex environment because it's a four-dimensional environment. So we need performance in this sense, and also provide a very scalable deployment. So starting from small servers to very large infrastructure. So it was a very robust ground to create and craft this kind of tool. So from a semantic point of view, as you already seen, this is on the left. You can see there is the GraphML that you already saw in the previous presentation. The first thing was to what we are going to extract from this GraphML. This is basically the graph database of the extended matrix. In this case, we need to extract three different things. One is the timeline. And that is basically all the time periods that, as you saw, there are on the extended matrix are on the vertical axis. So we the first thing is to list and extract all the periods. Then we extract the proxy graph. That means is basically the semantic skeleton that we are going to query and inspect with all the proxies and so on. And then we have the source graphs. The source graph has basically all the validation chains for each single proxy. Okay, so this tells you a specific proxy or the validation behind. So this is basically the three things that we need to extract for runtime. On the other side, for what we are actually seeing, so what the visible scene, of course, we deal with the multi-temporal virtual environment. So we have to deal with several representation models. Each representation model is assigned to a specific period. So you have basically an archaeological site in different periods. Okay. Each one of these representation models, we can use scene graph. So basically, there is a hierarchy behind. This is because, as you can imagine, there can be several cases where there are portions of your scene or your scene that has different pacing. So portions that evolve differently in time. So the fact that we are using this kind of scene graph structure allow us to create more advanced structures and representations in this sense. Also, it's very useful for this kind of application because we are exploiting also the reuse of shared portions also for the web. And then, of course, you can imagine specific hierarchies. For instance, there can be multi-resolution level of details specifically for the scene of specific elements of your reconstruction model and so on. So this is, of course, important. Okay, so let's have a look more in detail on three different aspects of the web application, more in practice. The first one is the exploration. And here we are basically dealing with the exploration of both time and space. So that means that we have a four-dimensional exploration. As you can see, there is a video here that is showing you the basic navigation that you can perform inside the EMviq tool. This is basically, there is different modes and that you can use to explore the environment. Here we can see there is also the first person mode. These are exploration modes, navigation modes offered by the underneath Atom framework that allows you to basically move into the space using different interaction models. Okay, so as you can see, there are different cases here showing in the video. In this case, we are using a common teleport technique to move around and look around the space. And then, of course, we have on the other side the exploration of time. Once again, as you can see on the bottom here of the interface, there is a timeline that you can use to move through time. In this case, this timeline is basically automatically built from the extended matrix. So once you provide the GraphML, the tool automatically extracts all the information of the time periods and builds the interface for you. Okay, automatically. The second aspect is, of course, very important, is the query. So how we can inspect this four-dimensional space. In this case, as you can see on the video, we are inspecting the proxies that are automatically arranged into the space. And you have also, you as a user, you have also different options for visibility of the proxies. Like in this case, as you can see, you can choose visualization options to show, for instance, in this case, the proxies overlaid on top of the representation models. And also you have several options for query occlusion. Like in this case, you can see there can be proxies that are occluded by the representation models. So you can tweak all these options in order to fit your specific requirements when you are using the tool. And of course, also you can, as you will see now in the video, you can show all the proxies coming from all the periods that were extracted from the extended matrix. This is very useful for debugging. So when you are working on a GraphML on the extended matrix, you can use this show all the whole proxy graph to actually see if everything is fine and everything was loaded correctly. Then the third aspect that I want to highlight here is the search capabilities. In this case, we can use the smart box on the bottom to search for a specific proxy, like in this case, USB 100. Okay, so a specific strategic unit, or you can use to filter. So you can use a sort of filter and classify a specific set of proxies. And as you can see, the camera is automatically adjusting on the search results. You can also choose to search by term, like in this case, wall, opus here. This is possible because once the GraphML is, we extract all this data from the GraphML, we also have access to all the descriptions inside the proxies and also all the nodes, the extended matrix nodes. So this allows us and the tool to basically search by terms directly inside what is contained inside the GraphML, and this can be very useful if you are looking for something very specific. Also, not by the specific ID of the proxy, but also by term, so like walls and everything that is automatically written inside your descriptions. So in terms of development of this tool within the SSHOC project, of course, the main one of the main efforts was to the extraction of this data. So to basically develop this is called the parser that basically takes in as an input the GraphML, so the extended matrix that is in XML format. And from this XML, you have to extract several runtime data that in our case are basically different graphs, because you have to deal with a lot of graphs and so nodes and relationship that we have to deal at runtime in order to present to you all these features that you are looking at for the tool. Regarding other structure, we basically inherited all the features that the Atom framework is offering. Here is a very basic mapping of what are the Atom features that are already there and how we exploited these features. For instance, the semantic shapes that Atom offers us were employed, of course, for creating the proxies. Then we have the possibility to switch between layers. There's basically the whole scene that in Atom is a JSON file, is a scene descriptor, very interoperable also with other tools. As you can see also in the presentation of Emanuel, it is possible to directly from Blender to export into this JSON file. And this was used, of course, to host all the different representation models that are basically scene graph. Then we also exploit the all the capabilities of the viewpoints that are offered by the Atom. Like you saw a bit of these features while we are searching for something, like in the search, the smart search that we saw, that there is the camera that is automatically adjusting and focusing on specific proxy or group of proxies. And then on a more technical side, but I won't go too much into detail, they offers advanced structure that guarantee very efficient queries that in this case, as you can imagine, are very complex because we are querying a four-dimensional space. So it was very important to have something very robust in terms of performance and efficiency. So regarding the data that we used for creating lighting, in this case, the SSHOC case of the theaters of Roman theater of Catania, we employed a cloud-based workflow. It's not new. We already employed this workflow in several past projects. Like for instance, also into the Ariadne infrastructure, that we use the same approach. So you have a cloud that we use to access and place there all the data and the assets that we are going to use for the tool. That means all the 3D models, 3D assets, basically, the GraphML, so the extended metrics, the proxies, and so on. So we have a cloud folder that many professionals, even in different locations, can access and load and manage their data. Being a cloud, it also provides us with fine-grained access policies. That means that you can, for instance, define in a fine manner which folder is accessible by who. This is very important in a distributed workflow among research groups, for instance. And then also you can use the tool for live update of the extended matrix. That means that since it is a very light file, actually, you can have one archaeologist that is working on an extended matrix from a completely different part of the world, and then another one is using the tool inside the web page, and there is just a button to automatically reload the extended matrix. This is very useful for once again for remote debugging and see live all the changes that are made by another person in a completely different location. And then, of course, we have here, I can play the video, the possibility to have all these immersive VR interfaces for, in this case, this is an Oculus Quest. This is the same identical tool that I just opened to the browser of the Oculus head-mounted display. So you can understand from this video how it can be, this tool can be very flexible, because we have all the different, very different wide range of possibilities to consume this kind of experience with very different devices, ranging from mobile to, in this case, a very advanced device that is 6 degrees of freedom head-mounted display. And once again, all you can see here, the 3D spatial UI that you are seeing here, the labels that you are looking at are coming from features that are offered by the Eton framework. Okay, so just a few final considerations of what we saw today in this introductory presentation of the EMviq tool. As you saw, is a very flexible tool that lives online, or you can also install offline if you want. And this basically offers you the possibility to explore a four-dimensional space, like in this case, the case of the theater of Catania, and also other use cases that we are working on. The possibility to query this four-dimensional space, the search capabilities, so that the possibility to look for something specifically directly inside the tool in a live manner. This is a smart box, as you saw. You can search by term or a specific ID. We also working on specifically for SSHOC for the Roman theater of Catania, as we saw in a few snapshots and videos. Is a work in progress, but of course we are going forward with the case. Here you can see just already some screenshots from in this case 2 periods of the case study. It proved to be in this case, but also in previous cases, this tool proved to be very useful for and powerful for validation. That means, okay, I create my extended matrix, but I want to assess it or validate it through a tool, because this tool is basically can be used for a strong validation of what you created. If there is something that is not connected, or you connected it wrong into the ED software, you see directly inside the tool, and so it can be very useful in this sense. We saw that it can be integrated with a cloud-based workflow. This can be very useful because it allows a distributed pipeline between among several professionals that are scattered across different locations in the world. And since it's based on the Atom framework, we have several advantages. One is that we basically, in general, we inherit all the features that are offered by the framework. So in this case, the cross-device presentation in different devices, the fact that we are embracing open standards and open specifications, that means interoperability with other libraries, framework, tools, online tools, and so on. We have a responsive user interface, of course, so it automatically adapts to different device. And all the tools that are basically being developed in the Atom framework are automatically inherited by the EMviq tool. So this is very good in perspective to have some such of automatic updates coming from the underneath framework that is, of course, open source. So it can be reused in several ways. So I thank you very much for the attention. Here I just dropped a few links regarding the EMviq, that of course is a web application that is of course open source. Here's the GitHub, the official website, and also there is the official website of the Atom framework.
Wolfgang, I can start with the essential one on the SSHOC reference ontology to have just a small resume of the speech of Atina Mitsotakis from the 4th Institute. So what is very relevant for our day, for our focus on the Catania theater, is the presence inside the SSHOC European project of experimental research direction, trying to extend the functionalities of the CDOC-CRM tool and to focus these functionalities in the direction of the life cycle of the digital assets. And not only the digital assets, but also the processes, the scientific processes that are involved in the research. So it's wider in scope regarding the original SSHOC approach and the other SSHOC-based approaches. And for that reason, it has, in my opinion, a lot of links with the work that is presented today, especially when we have to reenact a previous research and to analyze how it was performed in order to propose to make it transparent, let's say. So we have a scientific publication regarding the virtual reconstruction of the Catania theater, and Atina showed us the possibility to just I don't want to with the wrong terms, the possibility
to distinguish
yeah.
Yes,
Thank you.
phase with the input and outcomes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
In this way, we have a formal tool in order to make it evident what is the innovation provided by the research and what the process is involved. For that reason, I think that it will be interesting to find closer. It would be interesting to involve you, Atina,
Yes.
if you want, in this case study, just for practical element, for practical focus.
Yes, of course, it's very interesting. We try to cooperate or to study the IOLI platform, which is, I think you have common practices. They do 3D reconstructions. The problem is that they document the outcomes and not the phases that produce them. So we didn't have data. This is a problem you referred before. So if you can distinguish and identify the procedures that you follow, this is very useful for us.
Okay, thank you, Atina. Thank you so much. So I give the floor to Wolfgang for the session on the FAIR principles.
Okay, thank you. So we were a small group, so we decided to skip Holly's presentation and have a discussion instead. One main topic was long-term preservation. So we all want complex data, but the more complex the data is, the more difficult it is to actually keep it for a long time, because systems no longer work, and your computer died and you cannot even install it on the next computer, and so on. And Martina was describing her situation across Asia, which is a service here in Berlin that provides many commercial Chinese databases to researchers in Germany. And the problem is that the data is very different, and all providers have different ideas about the data, and sometimes the data is just messy and sometimes it's just wrong. Whatever JPEGs are mislabeled as something else, and if you look at them in the browser says, yeah, it's fine, I just displayed. But if you want to preserve them, then you have a problem. And we were also talking about metadata and paradata, and the problem of trust in data. So how to create trust, and we had a scenario of we find a data set, and the question of the researcher has, can I reuse it, and what do I need to know? And there's lots of description, and And I'm confused by this, and can I have some simple information or something that works more easily? And this is just very difficult, but what users want. And one example that we had that, for example, for the different kind of data was that places in all databases are different. So some go down to the level of villages and some are not. And if you want to query for villages, it only works in this one database and nowhere else. So if you want to have a unified search system, for example, you have to boil down the data often. And you want to have the original data in the background, but the actual search works sometimes with the boiled down data. And a problem is that researchers tend to think, yeah, someone will solve this problem for me. But I think we all need to look at data in this respect and not run away. And Holly's described a little bit her work in the SIADA project, where they look at what people actually want and what they have, and they want to come to the point that they can ask the right questions about data and about the data complexity and how to preserve it. And so, and it's a difficult business, but work that just needs to be done. It will become even more important in the next years. So that's it from this session. And now, Alberto, is that right?
Yes. Okay, I attended the session of Bruno about the EMviq tool, the extended metrics visual inspector and query, that is a cross-device online interactive 4D visualization tool for the extended matrices. And with the EMviq, Bruno approached the problem of develop a tool that was able from one side to parse the extended metrics, understand all the nodes of the graph file which the metric is built on, and at the same, on the other end, it is able to visualize the connected 3D object that can be navigated visually and inspected. In fact, the EMviq tool have three main aspects in practice that are exploration, query, and search. The exploration is intended both of time and space. Of space is obvious. You can move within the 3D reconstructed site or imaginary site, but the time is not obvious just because EMviq has a timeline at the bottom that allow the user to change the time in which the archaeological site is reconstructed. At the same time, this tool allow also to query object and to get the knowledge from the extended metrics in this way. The EMviq tool is an interface, a query interface to the metrics that have been explained by Emanuel, and can also provide tools to search something. So, for example, a full text search that can find all the object that matches the key we are searching. In the development schedule of EMviq, as it started as a desktop tool, and Bruno recently moved it towards a fully online architecture. The next step, one of the next step, will be make the tool collaborative in order to let more users to navigate at the same time in a synchronous way the 3D scenario, and to interact to each other. I think that's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
If we focus on the virtual reconstruction process based on the extended matrix formal language from a more technical perspective, we find that they are not only several tools involved, but they are also a so heterogeneous mix of online and desktop application that it makes hard for the researcher even to orientate in this ecosystem. For example, to create the extended matrix, it is needed in Blender, an open source desktop software. Inside it, a plugin must be installed to generate a part of the graph file representing the matrix. After that, another desktop tool, a multi-format editor called YED, is needed to populate the matrix. One of the major developments in this direction would be to have one single place where, from one end, all the needed tools could be available for the researcher, and from the other end, where to be guided through the reconstruction process itself. In other words, we are thinking to create an online unique cloud service in place of the fragmented current process. The opportunity to provide such a service to a broad audience is also given by the chance of IRIS project, of which ISPC is the coordinating partner for Italy. Within the current infrastructure phase of IRIS Italy, there will be soon available 2 different data centers called DigiLab, an high-performance computing center located in Naples, and a robotized data tape library located in Lecce. These nodes will provide the computing and storage power to host several services. From a schematic point of view, the future system architecture will rely on the IRIS DigiLab nodes that will grant access to data and computing power through an access layer that will contain the service programming interface. On the top of it will be placed all the services made available to the community, going from the SSHOC services, extended matrix creation, EMviq navigation tool, to the open access digital library, which I have mentioned before. So this is the roadmap in our mind. We hope we will be able to reach this goal, and I leave the stage to Emanuel, I think.
We are trying to focus on data integration in the end, data integration and system integration. In SSHOC, we have several opportunities to improve the extended matrix framework. One direction, for sure, is in regards the extraordinary work made by DAI on the field of chronology management and the chronontology. I prefer that it will be explained by Wolfgang. What we are doing now is to work on the classification of the time inside the extended matrix tool in order to find different the correct granularity to connect to the chronontology tool. This is one topic for the next month come. The extended matrix has wider roadmap that started long before the SSHOC project and hopefully will continue after the SSHOC project. Now we are in the 1.2 version of the extended matrix, and we are inside the SSHOC European project horizon. We have several steps in the future, and for us, a bigger step will be the full support support of SIDOC CRM in the version 2.0, intended as a full connection with graph databases, leaving the GraphML format for a more liquid format and a bigger capacity of interchange, like with JSON, or better full GraphDBs like Neo4j, for instance. Now we are following the SHARM data model. This is a wider in scope tool that fits very well the general links between the paradata. But we are struggling to improve a connection to the SIDOC CRM itself. I want to finish this part with a sort of take action, because we are working in the last year to the Open Extended Matrix initiative with a sort of joining forces with other institutes and other researchers in order to improve the tool, to make it available, the tools, the method, and the software that is actually open source software and that is available on GitHub. The Extended Matrix tool and the EMviq are completely available. You can download it and you can use it by yourself. And the idea is to improve these tools for the community. So we are working with several PhD students, researchers, and professionals, making courses, webinars, workshops, in order to disseminate the tool. And the feedback is very promising at the moment, because we have a lot of improvements by the community to the tool. I'm especially interested in the words of Wolfgang in this direction, because the connection of the extended matrix with DAI is the best chance for the extended matrix in the SSHOC project in this moment. So I want to give the floor to Wolfgang for this topic.
Okay, thanks. So there are two things here. So one is linked open data in general, and how to create a scenario that works with the 3D visualization and the data that is involved. And I'm particularly interested in also the norm data. So the example that I showed at the beginning already was that we need to align things on many levels. And one is to align the vocabularies and find out if epoch, phase, activity, and action are actually the same thing, just with larger or smaller temporal scopes, or if there are really things that need to be modeled, because the chronontology data model in that respect is very simple at the moment. Too simple, we cannot even describe events rather versus periods. So we definitely need to work on that. And for me, this is a great opportunity to do that. And as Emanuel said, the question of the correct granularity to connect to chronontology is right. So the question is always also, what is norm data? What do other people want to link to or use as norm data in their own systems? And I think we need some counterpart of gazetteers versus GeoServer data. So if you have just a bunch of points on a map, then you can just put them in a GeoServer system. And I think we need something similar for periods or for temporal data as well. And again, this is something that we have never tried before, and this is really something that is very exciting to me. Yeah, so the data model of chronontology will be shaken, but we will, we will have to accommodate for the data that we get. I think it's not the time here to go through what temporal gazetteers are, or what the difference is to place names. Maybe only very shortly that, so if you have a place like Rome or Paris, even if you don't really know the difference between an administrative unit or a settlement, people know, yeah, it's here. And this is often good enough. There are only a few cities that actually were once at one place and then moved to another place. I think Split is one of them. But with periods, you have the problem, for example, that they are much more wobbly in space and time, and that they are also created and named only after the fact. So people didn't say, yes, I live in the Hellenistic period. So there is a conceptual difficulty here that we have to take into account, but that's fine. Emanuel also talked about the uncertainty in data, and that this is also expressed in the extended matrix. We need to capture this as well in our linked open data scenario, because the data quality is one thing, but sometimes it's just not sure what happened. And this is also something that we need to describe. And then, yes, we have the problem with the linked open data. So is it actually, who is our audience? Is it humans? Is it machines? Do we just provide the data and see who takes it up and does something with it? Or do we actually create a search interface? I would doubt that this is the scope of our task, but I think we still need to take this, have this in our head, that the data, the raw data is a goal in itself, but if no one can look at it, then we also have a problem. And that the CDOC-CM comes in. We need some unified idea of standards of how the data should look like, so that it can actually be read by other systems or displayed in or searched. And so there are many open questions, and we are trying to answer them in Pelagios, for example, for geodata. And if you put 10 people in a room, you get many, many different opinions on that. But we will find some answer in our project, knowing full well that they will not be written in stone. And but we want to create one example of where we think this makes sense. So maybe just very shortly at the end, So for me now, so we had the workflow idea, the unified workflow idea, where we streamline our systems and data and put them together and make it possible that what is exported from one system can be put into the next system. We will still do this, and of course the ISPC has done tremendous work here already. We will continue with connecting this with the DAI systems on the systems level and on the data level. But the scenario will be also a very important point now. And there are some collaborations within the SSHOC project that we will try to do, and that is, as we already had the CDOC-CRM and the FAIR principles with Holly, and then the thing that gave the whole SSHOC project its name, the cloud. So there are people working on Dataverse, and we will see if this can be used for our purpose. So Alberto also described that Iris might also solve the problem with DigiLab. We will, so if this turns out to work well, then I'm more than happy. And as we already had in this discussion in Holly's breakout session, there is the question of long-term preservation. How does a system need to look like if it's able to actually accommodate the data and the systems that we have? Especially for 3D or 4D data, you also need to be able to accommodate the system in itself, because the data is somewhat dry if you cannot look at it. And that's it from my side. I think the only thing to say is now a big thank you to all participants, and an even bigger thank you to the organizers. Thank you. That was really well done.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.